This time I thought I would show you some of the drawings that I've done in the past, the ones I've kept anyway. These are designs for characters of mine from a story that I've kind of never wrote. When I was very, very young, I came up with an idea for a kind of superhero comic book. I started drawing it when I was 6 years old. And it was simple. It was just little stickmen fighting each other with swords and so on. Kind of like Star Wars, only a little bit more to the fantasy side. And the hero was dressed in red, and again, originally it was this little stickman, and he had a red cape, and so this is my modern interpretation of my hero, known as Hookman, or the Hookman, real name James Dorwin. He comes from Earth, or he did as a young child, and ended up going into another world, a world that he thought he created through his imagination, but actually it was tapping into an kind of inner world. You can look at it as the world that he goes into, which I call Hookworld. You could either call it his inner world, or you could call it an alternate world, in an alternate universe to Earth, that he was basically subconsciously picking up on. And of course, when he's there, he doesn't know which it is. He knows it's real as our world is, but he's not sure if he created it through his mind, or if he's somehow stuck deep, like into the deep recesses of his mind, and he can't get out. He doesn't know if Earth was a dream. So it's kind of interesting like that, but it is technically a superhero story that I conceived as a little kid. But as I got older, I developed it more and more, and I was thinking of making a graphic novel on it, but it's such a huge undertaking for me while working full-time. I just don't think I can quite manage it. But these are some of the drawings that I've done. This is James Dorwin dressed in his armor. It's like black armor. He and his knights wear this black armor. If you can picture him with a sword, but also with a blaster of some kind as well. Friends of his, Dalen, I've been calling him. I've changed his name over the years many times. For whatever reason, I've never been able to settle on one appropriate name for him. So I changed a lot. And this is Julia, dressed in different kinds of gowns for different occasions. And more Julia, but then another couple of female warriors, Brent, who's kind of the general who is managing things in Hook Village. And as for Hook, what does Hook mean? Hookman, Hookworld, that's the problem. I have no idea. I've never given him a hook for a hand, really. One time, perhaps I did. But I never had any justification for that. I've tried to think of some, but they always seem contrived, whatever reasons I can come up with. But I don't know. For whatever reason, again, I was very little, and for some reason, it just became Hookman, Hookworld. And these are some interesting alien designs that I've come up with just like a year ago, I think I was doing these. So these are new. These aren't things that I came up with in my past. These are recent concepts. Because the idea that I had was that James Doran and his friends in Hook Village, they work a lot of diplomacy and trying to keep peace between different people, but of course sometimes it's necessary, kind of similar to Star Trek in that way. But yeah, I mean, they're basically peacekeepers. So it's there's action adventure in it, but it's not all just war like Star Wars. There's also a lot of like peacekeeping to the stories as well. And yeah, I like some of these designs. Kind of neat. I'm not sure if I would have used all of these, but ideas for different creatures. Some that are native to Hookworld, and some that are from other worlds. This is Lord Sovak. He's been the villain from pretty much the very beginning. I used to paint him, or color him rather, as green, and I'm not sure if he would be green or if I'd make him gray. I'm not sure, but greenish probably. But yeah, it was always a reptile man, basically. Very basic concept, but basic's not bad. That can still work. Lord Ruman is like one of the underlords that serve him. He's like a high-ranking noble, basically. There's different ideas I have with him. He may be around for a long time, or I might kill him off really early on. If I were to do this, and I might do it as a novel or a novel series, maybe short stories. I haven't decided yet. But I don't know. So I'm just sharing some ideas that I've been working out. Unsure exactly what I'll be doing with them. So that's Sovak in his armor, his warrior armor. And, the Table Len warriors. The Table Len are basically ninjas in purple. That was the concept. That's the Table Len warrior right here. They all dress like that. The only thing that distinguishes them, they're all bald. They're essentially clones. They're essentially bioengineered, and they're raised similar to the stormtroopers in Star Wars, but this is a concept that I came up with long before I knew that stormtroopers were clones, or that had been clones. In the time of the prequels they were anyway, but no, I came up with this like way back in the 80s. The idea that they were just a bunch of, again, raised to be mindless, obedient servants and or warriors. The only thing that distinguishes the warriors is that they're branded with I've changed the concept of it different times. Sometimes it's like a burn mark, sometimes it's a tattoo, but I really like the idea that they have like a bone formation, some kind of mutant bone formation that's bioengineered into them to distinguish the different families, I suppose, the different clans within the Table Len. And that would be a captain that would be very well trained. And being true to my comic books, the captains are always better warriors than the regular warriors. And of course, in real life, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Usually you go up the ranks by how intelligent you are, how good of a leader you are. It's not really your warrior skills, but perhaps in the Table Len it works a little differently. It is a fantasy world after all. Again, I'm taking a concept that I came up with when I was 6 years old and that I have been expanding on since, but figuring out in what ways should I make it more sophisticated, and in what way should I stay true to the earlier vision that I had of it. But yeah, this is the design for a major and a warlord. You can see they have different patterns. That's not to do with their rank, it's to do with their their clans, basically. He has a scar. The warlord would be the highest ranking of the Table Len, the highest that they could go, or they could potentially become a lord or the overlord, Sovak. But Sovak is didn't mention, he's like an immortal. Theoretically, he can't die. He's a living god. At least that's what he believes, and his followers are bred and raised to believe that he is literally a living god. Is he or is he not? Again, a little unsure. I like the idea of keeping some things mysterious. He certainly believes he is, and he is at least a few hundred years old. So, definitely an immortal of sorts. Why is that? It's his race. They live, they have long lives, and they're considered more intelligent than human beings, which doesn't make them a race of gods. And why is he the last one? Well, they essentially destroyed one another in civil war, and their enemies came in and finished off what was left of them. Only Sovak survived, but he took control over the forces which they had taken control of that were still loyal to them, and he raised up this great empire to take Hookworld and the universe. So that's Hookworld itself is supposed to be like the spiritual center of the universe, essentially. Theoretically, if you could take Hookworld, you'd have the universe, and that's a very basic concept that reminds me a little bit of Dune. But yeah, it's something I developed over time, but it's very familiar, with a lot of other creative properties that I could think of. table show is a more recent idea I came up with for basically the table Lin are the warriors, the table show are the defenders. So these are guards, basically. And so yeah, they don't usually become generals, but they're responsible, trusted for protecting the assets of the overlord and the other lords, of course, as well. And the more trusted they are, the higher up the ranks that they can go to actually becoming a sentinel. Basically, then you're a personal guard to the overlord and or the other lords as well. So I mean, that's a very prestigious position for them to have, and they all aspire to it. Kind of the idea that I have is that they are treated something of like a low nobility is how they're treated, and that they have nice chambers to live in, they have servants like knights in the medieval time kind of thing, so the reason partly why that the other ones, so many of them are willing to risk their lives and to fight so hard and stuff. I mean, partly because they believe in the cause. There's a religiosity to it, but it's partly also because they dream of getting in a position where they can be a sentinel, and they're not in a great deal of risk most of the time. It's more a prestigious position that's earned by proving yourself as a great warrior, but also that you can be trusted. And you can live a life of luxury compared to a normal guard or a normal warrior, but typically it is the guards that become sentinels. And these are herks. It's a little bit similar to the orcs, the Lord of the Rings kind of thing, but it's the idea that they are a sickly people that are essentially dying, and they've been servants to Sovak and his people. I don't know if I wrote down exactly. Well, I guess I didn't. I don't remember the name for Sovak's race, but anyway. And then there's these guys as well, the Kryn. The Kryn are another race that serve. They're loyal to Sovak and believe him to be a living god, although they have their own lord that rules over them. Of course, he's that because he's trusted by Sovak. So he has a very, very prestigious position over his people, but he's very much a puppet of Sovak's. Yeah, so you have their different designs, and Lord Porgan. Yeah, it's like a samurai, obviously, kind of villain. Different aliens and creatures that I have. I like that, how it's very aggressive, this one, and yet at the same time it's very posh. So it has a very sophisticated look and yet intimidating at the same time. This is Cody. I call it, sounds like a dog's name, but it's a gigantic monster. There's always monsters and all kinds of mythical creatures in Hookworld, and it's what you'd expect to come from an imaginative kid's imagination. But as an adult, I'm not sure how to explain all that. I have different theories as to explain why there's giant, hideous monsters in the world, but that's something I've been working on. And dragons. This is the design I came up for dragons in Hookworld. I kind of like that. It's a little different yet familiar. So the idea that dragons in Hookworld are not super friendly, they're very, very destructive, and they can serve Sovak. Not all of them do. Some of them are independent, basically. Haven't fully developed them yet. I like the idea of them being intelligent in some way. Can they speak or speak telepathically? I don't know. Haven't determined that yet. In my old comic books, they were just, evil monsters, but I kind of like the idea of them having a little bit more depth than that. So, anyway, thought I'd share these. It's an interesting this upside down. Some interesting character designs for Hookworld, which I may be doing something with in the near future. I'll have to see.